In this video, I'm going to be doing a teardown of a Sony Vaio PCG-729. I'll be upgrading the spinning hard drive to a compact flash-based SSD solution. I'll be removing the CMOS battery and cleaning up the connector where it was starting to leak, and then finally taking a tour of the factory Japanese Windows installation. But first, some history and specs. The Sony Vaio 700 series was the first line of Sony computers to carry the Vaio branding. The 705 and 707 were first launched in Japan in July of 1997, later coming to the US. They were quickly discontinued in 1998 to be replaced by the much smaller ultra-slim 500 series. My 729 model has an Intel Pentium 266 MHz CPU, the original starting at 150 MHz. It has a 12.1-inch 1024 by 768 resolution TFT screen, though the lowest spec was only 800 by 600. It has a 2.1 gigabyte hard drive, 2.5-inch 44-pin IDE. Memory varied all the way down to 16 megabytes. My model has 64 megabytes and it's upgradable to a maximum of 128 megabytes. Originally installed with Windows 95, there was an official Windows 98 upgrade, which mine has. And finally, the weight comes in at 5.3 pounds. So taking a look at the laptop, we have nothing on the front except for the lid release. On the side, we have our built-in 33.6K dial-up modem. Kind of interesting, it's tucked in underneath the eject levers for our PC card slots. Some dummy plugs here. Also our swappable CD-ROM drive, I'll show more of that later. Along the back, we have a bunch of I/O ports, all underneath covers. We have our DC in jack. On the first door here, we have our combo PS2 mouse keyboard port, a 9-pin serial port, and a VGA port. In the middle, we have our docking station connector. And on the right, a 25-pin printer port, also used for the external floppy drive, a USB port, and a 3.5mm video out to composite, and the infrared port. On the other side, we have our headphone out with additional pins for an external controller, microphone, line in, and our power button. We slide down this cover and we can pull out the hard drive caddy. It's already got my compact flash adapter in here. And under the last door is our lithium ion 14.4 volt 2400 milliamp battery. Underneath this little door is our BIOS chip and then our memory, 2 sticks. This is a very modular and reconfigurable laptop. Moving the release, you can slide out the original CD-ROM drive. It's just a reader, not a writer. And you can replace it with a 3.5-inch floppy drive module. Now you also have the option to add a second battery. So here I'm taking the battery out of its original spot and plugging it into the bay where the CD-ROM or floppy drive would go. There's a weight saver plug that would cover this up and fill in this gap. You can also use that to make the laptop lighter and not plug anything into this bay. We have some little flip-up rubber feet on each side, angle up the laptop. Opening it up, it's a fairly standard laptop. Trackpad, mouse buttons, the classic gray and blue Vaio color scheme. Showing off some accessories, mine came with this USB Vaio branded ball mouse. One interesting option when you're using the CD-ROM drive in the bay and you have your 3.5-inch floppy drive, you can use this cable, plug it into the drive. You have your 25-pin parallel port, which you can plug into the back of the laptop right here. So you can use both at the same time. Now normally it would have come with a little stand to hold it up vertically, but I don't have mine. And finally the dock. Now this is a pretty impressive dock with lots of ports, lots of flexibility. You can see on the side it gives us another one of those modular bays, so we can plug in either the floppy drive or the CD-ROM module. On the other side, we have a bay for another battery. And along the back, we have all kinds of ports, lots of them that you don't typically see on a laptop. Starting in the upper left, we have dedicated PS2 mouse and keyboard ports, USB ports, composite video out, a VGA out, a printer port, a 9-pin serial port, DC in jack, a game port, microphone, line in, line out, a DV in out port, a SCSI port, and an Ethernet jack. To use the dock, you sit the laptop onto the little metal stud, get it close into position, and there's a locking lever that pulls it onto the connector. Here's the lock release switch. So let's get started with the teardown. First, let's check out this removable BIOS chip underneath this little door. Now, I know other laptops of this vintage, like the Libretto, you could flash your BIOS through a DOS utility. I actually recovered a BIOS update installer that the original owner of this laptop had downloaded. So I'm not quite sure the reason for this. Maybe it was a fail-safe in case a flash went bad, or it's easier to quickly update many laptops just by swapping the chip. Maybe they thought some customers weren't able to update it through DOS. Underneath this cover, we have the 2 memory slots. I believe these are 144-pin PC100 SODIMMs. To upgrade the hard drive, you don't actually need to open up the machine. It's just in a caddy, but I want to replace the CMOS battery. Luckily, I'm catching mine just in time, but I saw pictures of another one that was pretty much damaged beyond repair due to the battery leaking. So here I am removing the 5 long screws from the base. They're all the same size and they're all marked with arrows. In the top bezel, we have 2 small screws hidden underneath these little plastic covers that are glued in place. Need to pry them off. Now we can take off the top cover. I wasn't quite sure how this opened. Really, more than prying up on it, you just slide it towards yourself to release it. As you can see, the keyboard just kind of stays in place, but the top cover remains connected just by the trackpad. There's enough slack to just kind of move it aside, leaving it connected, but we'll need to disconnect the keyboard. Now removing the keyboard, we need to lift up on this connector that releases tension on the ribbon cables. I can already see some green corrosion on the pins for the battery connector. We can work this battery out underneath the LCD cable without having to disconnect anything else. So we do have some corrosion, but it doesn't look like it's done any damage to the boards yet. So my standard cleanup for this is to start out with some white vinegar, scrubbing it in with an anti-static brush and then letting it soak for a little bit. So after it's soaked for a bit, I protect the screen and then spray it with some isopropyl alcohol, and then finally some CRC contact cleaner. So now reassembly begins. We do everything in reverse, reconnecting the keyboard, sliding the ribbon cables back in, pushing down the locking tabs to hold the cables. So now to reinstall the top cover, we need to kind of line everything up with the keyboard, get it in position, and we slide the top cover forward to lock it into place. And finally, reinstall the screws on the top, the bottom, and their covers. So now we can upgrade our hard drive. It's pretty straightforward since it's just in a caddy. We slide the face down, and then we can slide the drive out. This could be a standard 2.5-inch 44-pin IDE drive. We have 4 screws holding the drive into the caddy. Next, I'm going to gently pry off the connector from the drive. You notice there's some foam sticking to the bottom of the drive and the bottom of the caddy. This is all kind of deteriorating and turning to dust, so I clean it off of the caddy. Here's our clean caddy, the foam residue all gone. I'm using this Saiba compact flash adapter. You do have to snip off a pin to make this work since it's keyed. I grabbed this since I knew it had all the proper mounting holes to fit into the caddy. However, in hindsight, I'd probably switch it to a 3D printed bracket. I know I have some that would let you unplug the compact flash card without having to unscrew the adapter from the caddy if you ever need to quickly swap it. And finally, reinstall the 4 screws and slide it back into the laptop. So now let's do our first boot. Check out the BIOS options. So now let's do a tour of the Japanese Windows 98 installation. Fortunately, this appears to be one of the less common variants, so I couldn't find recovery media. It didn't come with recovery media. Even though all the 700 series are basically the same, just minor spec differences, Vaio recovery media is locked down, so it'll only install on that specific exact model. So for this tour, I'll show the machine as I got it. I did a little bit of cleanup, but it has programs the original owner had installed that wouldn't have come stock. This first one, Just Systems, I believe is one that the user installed. Looks to be a really common Japanese word processor. Checking out some of the on-screen hardware control function keys. This looks to be some kind of online VRML. I'm not sure if it was pre-installed with the laptop, but it does seem to have Sony branding. There's also some wallpaper related to it. Battery scope, which gives you battery statistics. Sony notebook setup, which gives you basic notebook statistics. Also, you can adjust a bunch of settings that would normally be in the BIOS, other hardware settings. This looks to be some kind of answering machine phone dialing software using a built-in modem. Some software to import from your DV camera. note, a lot of the software on here wouldn't run, especially the games, because they all wanted a CD before they'd start. Here's our manual in PDF format, Japanese. Here's that weight saver plug that you'd use when you're using a second battery, or you just want to leave the bay empty without a floppy or CD-ROM drive to save weight. The Sony user registration application. Here I'm just going to skim through all the applications, and they're all programs. Again, a lot of these were installed by the user. Checking out the Yamaha music player apps. This has some interesting visualizers. Here's the only game that I can actually run without a CD. I'm in a slot machine. Checking out the wallpaper and screensavers. It has some for that Safari Sony community site. Checking out some of the icons on the desktop, I see some Norton utilities here. Don't really recall using these in Windows before, or in DOS. These were probably installed by the user later. And finally, a quick look at system properties. But that's it. Thanks for watching.